Victoria is facing a housing crunch with bold government targets, planning reforms and deepening rental crisis, sparking fierce debate about whether policy is keeping pace with reality. I'm Dion Besser from Besser+co, and this is Beyond the Deal. Joining me today on Beyond the Deal is Richard Riordan, Shadow Minister for Housing here in Victoria. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dion. Good to be here.
Thank you. Let's jump straight into it. The Allen government has set a target of 800,000 new homes by 2034. Do you believe this is a realistic target?
Well, Dion, under normal circumstances, it should be realistic. Unfortunately, here in Victoria, the government has no credibility on this target. And the first 2 years of this target, we've seen barely 60,000 homes built. We're massively falling short of the target already. And that's going to become as a great disappointment to first home buyers, renters and others desperately trying to get into the market here in Victoria.
Okay, so I mean, is building near transport the right approach?
Absolutely. A good government is going to make sure that its people can get around. That makes sense. The only problem is the government's focus is on existing infrastructure and existing transport. The fact is, right around Melbourne, whether you're in the southeast, the north or the western suburbs, we have, take for example out in the west, 480-odd thousand people that are still relying on V-line services as part of greater metropolitan Melbourne. So we've got to ask the question, what are our priorities? Are we looking after the people that we've already put into suburbs, or are we going to forget about them and start another new project? And my concern is we're doing the latter. We're concentrating on creating new ideas without looking after the messes we've already made.
Got it. So it's sort of just Band-Aid.
It's a Band-Aid, and I think Victorians, Dion, can look to Fisherman's Bend. For 12 years now, that has been zoned and allowed to be an area of great density and great growth, really close to the city, well located. It's just required the government to put some public transport infrastructure in, and they've failed to deliver. 12 years on, 6,000 of the projected 80,000 homes have been allowed for. So you've got to ask the question, this government's just not serious about getting the mix of transport, infrastructure and housing to work together and collaboratively in Melbourne.
Well, 50 new high-density activity centres are on the map, with buildings up to 16 stories exempt from VCAT review. Is this the right strategy? We
have sympathy for allowing greater utilisation of the high streets across our existing suburbs and allowing a bit more height in certain areas. But what we don't stand for is we don't stand for destroying our heritage, we don't stand for getting rid of tree canopy cover, and we don't stand for putting 800,000 people, essentially the city the size of Adelaide, into existing suburbs without any plan for extra infrastructure. So, for example, Dion, you go and put another 20 or 30,000 people in Melbourne in an inner city suburb in a community, we'll need more schools, more health services, more childcare. In fact, if the tram's running every 20 minutes, half an hour, the tram's going to have to run every 15 minutes. Are there extra trams going to be provided? So there's lots of questions being asked and the government doesn't have the answers for it. And what I'm desperately concerned about is that this is just a big tax grab, because the rezoning and the uplift will generate billions of dollars for the state, and we just don't know where that money's going.
And the communities around these centres are really raising a lot of concerns. Do you think the government's listening to those concerns that the local public are asking?
The Allen government isn't renowned for listening. They love a policy statement. And the concern is that the government is pushing very hard that we have a planning problem in Melbourne. I would respectfully suggest it's more an affordability problem than a planning problem. Melbourne has, for example, literally thousands of homes approved that people can't afford to build. Down in our regional cities, Geelong, there are 20 multi-storey apartments approved for the CBD of Geelong and not one of them has been started. So it's not about planning approval. And also, you know, here in Melbourne CBD, there are some 4,000 or 5,000 unsold apartments that have been built over the last 3 years. We just are building a product. We can't build a product that people can afford to buy.
Well, let's just move into the construction industry right now. I mean, the government has just passed the Domestic Building Contracts Amendments Bill 2025. Do you think these stronger protections for homeowners go far enough?
Well, it's not so matter where they go far enough, but what does that bill do to the affordability? And that's the question that a Liberal government, a Liberal coalition government will ask if we enter government next November, is every piece of policy around housing, rentals and so on, has to ask the question, are we making that product more affordable so that people can live. And the reason we have to ask that question is KPMG came out with a report a couple of months ago. 80% of product available on the market now is not affordable for the average income earner here in the state of Victoria. And that's a figure that used to be below 50%, you know, so it's a massive increase in the lack of affordability. And that new legislation that you referred to, the Building Amendment Act, it adds more cost to the building of apartments, it adds more cost and uncertainty to the building of homes. And what's interesting is that it has put a monopoly on the insurance management. Now, the government's argued that's a good thing. As someone who believes in the free market, I'm not sure creating government monopolies lead to downward pressure on pricing. And we only have to look at work cover fees, transport accident fees, and now we've got another new big one when we build our houses. That's going to be a monopoly as well. And all those government charges have continually increased and increased and increased.
So basically we need to get the cost of construction down.
Absolutely.
In order to make these properties more affordable. It's not about just building more properties, it's about making sure we can build them at a price that the market can then go on and sell and the community can buy.
Yep. So what this government has done, it has used our planning policies and our planning frameworks to create very political outcomes. And what I mean by that is the government has built in 7-star energy ratings, they've built in mitigation for climate change, bushfire, depending where you live, all sorts of other costs without looking at what we actually need versus what is a nice to have. And you know, I've said this many times, Dion, my kids would love a lovely heated indoor swimming pool at home. They'd absolutely love that. I'd probably even like it, but I can't afford it. I can't afford it.
Sure.
And so I have to make that life choice that I'm not going to have a heated indoor swimming pool. And it's a bit like that with the housing. We have such a housing crisis. 66,117 families tonight in Victoria are going to be sleeping in their car or a caravan, right? So that's at the really pointy end of the housing crisis, and that's increased 2,000 families a quarter now for the last 5 years.
Really?
And it's getting worse. It was, you know, only 10 years ago it was only 9,000. It's now 66,000. They're families, not individuals. And so we've got to ask the question: is it better to have a safe, comfortable, affordable house for that person to live in? Or do we want to keep building cost in to meet political outcomes and just keep those people destined for poverty and homelessness forever?
Let's talk a little bit about trade shortages. I mean, I speak to a lot of builders, I speak to a lot of developers, you know, I speak to a lot of people who want to build a home. There seems to be still today a significant trade shortage, which is also adding to those costs. How are we going to have an impact on those trade shortages to allow for the amount of demand that we have?
Well, this will come as a huge surprise to you, Dion. I blame the government for that as well.
Okay.
Why do I blame the government? Well, everyone's heard of the big build here in Victoria. Everyone's heard of the $200,000 a year stop-go sign hold people.
Yes.
Everyone's heard of the $50 billion blowout in costs. Every single building, private, small builder, tradesmen, electricians, plumbers and so on will tell you they can't get staff because the government's extravagance in its big build program is just sucking the life out of the industry. And we've seen this now having a national effect. We've seen Snowy Hydro, for example, in New South Wales, can't get workers to go and work up in New South Wales because they're all working on Victorian big build projects. The Victorian government has led to massive cost inflation, and quite frankly, until we take the reins and stop the massive billion-dollar blowouts on projects, then we're going to continue to have a labour and construction crisis here in Victoria when it comes to trying to build homes.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the rental relief and the tenants out there. You know, I speak to a lot of tenants out there and they're struggling. I mean, we've got average rents in Melbourne now at $570 a week. Across Melbourne in regional, we're sort of, you know, we're at around the $450 a week in regional. What sort of policies is your government going to bring to assisting these tenants in the short term at least? Well,
Dion, as someone in the industry, you'll be well aware there's been a massive exodus of supply from the private rental market.
Correct.
So if you look at the rental market in two parts, there's the government, what we used to call the Housing Commission and social housing component. The government's big build has led to a massive reduction in bedrooms there. So we've actually got less capacity at the government level. At the private level, we've seen just this year again more taxes on landlords, property owners. Property owners are being taxed out of it. You can basically now, there is no reason to hold residential property.
We're seeing that at Besser+co.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So people, some 27,000 fewer private rentals now in Victoria than what there was a few years ago, and that's in a spate of 3 or 4 years. This government has waged war against property owners. It also then, so not only is it the tax, so they're not getting a financial reward from it, and you know many property owners are self-funded retirees, they need the income. And the next big element, of course, is the regulations that have come in. At the end of the day, we have now knocked out literally thousands of homes from the rental market because range hoods, this is one crazy example, range hoods which were put in legally 15 years ago are now 10 centimetres lower than what they need to be under current building regulations, and you can't rent that house until you fix it. Yeah. You can't rent houses out now until you get rid of the gas heaters, until you do all sorts of expenses and expenditure.
This work is very expensive to do.
Can be very expensive. While the government, if they say it quick enough, oh, the landlord can pay for it, that's all very well. But landlords have to live as well, and landlords have choices.
Correct.
Do I cash in my house and buy some shares on the stock market and just have a simple, easy relationship with my income? Or do I have to fight with landlords, tenants, real estate agents, everything else? We've got to make renting easier and more simple.
And so how are we going to entice more people to invest in property so that there are more rental properties? Is there some way we can actually get more people buying investment properties, incentivise them?
A Liberal government is definitely going to say no more increases to property taxes. That's the first thing. We then have to have a clear plan that puts downward pressure on property taxes. We have to lift our addiction to property taxes.
Yep.
I'd also suggest that we have to have a serious look at the Residential Tenancies Act. We absolutely need good landlords, and we absolutely need...
Over 120 changes to the Residential Tenancy Act,
Correct.
And more coming.
And not only that, it's bringing in other complications, you know, about with the banning of gas here in Victoria, with regards to extra rights for tenants that need to be more a negotiation between landlord and tenant, to just say that tenants can now basically do what they like and the landlord has to suck it up. That's just taken the pendulum far too far the other way. We need a fairer balance, because at the end of the day, a property owner, that's their asset, right? And it's often underpinning their retirement. So they're, of course, very sensitive about it. We have to appreciate that and understand that. And finally, the government can do more to incentivise good spending of money on housing and reward long-term rental. People that genuinely invest in property for long-term rental should be rewarded for that investment, not penalised.
You've got an election next year. What's your party's vision for housing in the next term, and how will it differ from the Labor Party?
Glad you asked that question. Very differently. First of all, this government's approach is property owners are bad, property owners are a source of income for the state, and property owners are there to serve the government's benefit. And 4 years ago, the then Premier Andrews said young people don't want to own property anymore. We have a very different view. Our view is property ownership is good, property ownership should be encouraged, property ownership should be supported, and we want every young Victorian to aspire to get into a home, and we will allow that and facilitate that by increasing thresholds on stamp duty relief for first home buyers, raising it to $1 million. We will work with innovative ways that young people can get into their first property more easily. And we've got a lot more to announce on that over coming months, but essentially we want to supercharge young people's ability to get into the market at as early an age as possible. And we also want to work with downsizers and baby boomers who want to exit, making the exiting of the family home to free up the churn in the property market and to provide good retirement opportunities for older people, at the same time benefiting the next generation.
Richard, thank you very much for joining me on Beyond the Deal.
No worries, Dan. Thank you.
This program was presented by Besser+co Estate Agents. I'm Dion Besser. Thank you for watching.